Welcome to the discussion of the 1990 coup by Patrice Huggins and Sade Thomas.
Hello, everyone. As the introduction hinted, I am Patrice Huggins, and with me today is my partner, Sade Thomas. Together, we wish to engage you in breaking down the events leading to, during, and following the infamous 1990 attempted coup in Trinidad and Tobago. A coup d'etat. As elegant as the term may sound, it's characterized by disruption, fear, destruction, and long lasting consequences. The effects of the 1990 coup continue to be discussed and remembered generations later. The four resources we will examine today serve as a time capsule, helping us unfold and understand the events that took place. To understand what led to this bold attempt to overthrow the TNT government, we must first paint a picture of the country's political and economic climate at the time. Following the PNM's devastating electoral loss to the NAR, Prime Minister A.N.R. Robinson's administration faced significant economic challenges, particularly due to the oil bust of the 1980s. As economic conditions worsened, public dissatisfaction grew, leading to protests and increasing social unrest. It is within this context that we are introduced to the Jamaat al Muslimin, led by Yassin Abu Bakr, who was described by some as a radical Islamist leader. On July 27, 1990, Abu Bakr and members of his militant group stormed the Red House and the state television station TTT, announcing that members of parliament had been taken hostage. For 6 days, the nation watched as the hostage crisis unfolded. The event resulted in deaths, injuries, psychological trauma, widespread looting, and destruction throughout Port of Spain. Its impact remains one of the most significant events in Trinidad and Tobago's modern history. To explore this event, we examined four resources. The first is a commemorative video by Nalis. The second is a CCN TV6 special presentation featuring interviews with eyewitnesses, hostages, and journalists who experienced the coup firsthand. The third resource is the book Days of Wrath, titled The 1990 Coup in Trinidad and Tobago, written by journalist Raoul Pantin, who himself was held hostage at TTT during the coup. Finally, we reviewed the National Trust article titled What Happened to the Red House in 1990.
So, Shadi, looking at these resources, do you think you could see any that would be considered primary sources? And could you explain why?
Yes, we have primary sources. The first one is the book, Days of Wrath by Raoul Pantin. He was a journalist who was actually held gunpoint inside the TTT, which is Trinidad and Tobago television TV station, for 6 days during the coup. Since he lived through it and wrote down what he saw firsthand, it is a primary source. Also, it has videos from the NALST and TV6 news. So those also act as primary sources because they show real news clips, raw video, and interviews from right when the coup happened in 1990.
Yeah, so I agree that the Nallis video it contained historical footage and eyewitness accounts recorded during or directly related to the event. So this will make it a primary source. And similarly, as you said, the TV6 special presentation and that had first-hand testimonies from the individuals who experienced the coup. So this will give direct evidence of the event. And as you mentioned in your first example with the book, The Days of Wrath. Yes, it was published years after the coup. However, Raoul Pantin was a victim, or you could say a hostage of the event. So it was based off of his recollection. And this would be a first-hand testimony. So even though, yeah, the book published some while after, it will contain valuable primary source material. So, what about the secondary source? So, I was thinking the National Trust article because that would summarize everything and interpret the information that they would have pulled it from reports and interviews and other historical evidence rather than presenting original eyewitness testimony. So, you tell me what you think.
I would like to agree with you for secondary sources because the author of the article was not there to personally witness the structural damage that happened, but instead they analyze, as you said, and summarize the data, official records, and finds from the internet or wherever they found it and put it together for into a narrative long after the event took place.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I just want to go over whether these resources are scholarly or popular sources, and I will classify that both the Nala's video and the CCN TV6 documentary as popular sources because they were produced for public audiences, because it uses accessible language and aims to educate and inform rather than to contribute academically, right? And I'll say the same for the book Days of Wrath because it uses again simple language and it's not peer reviewed. And also, again, the same for the article with the National Trust. Yes, it is informative and credible, but it is intended for general audience and does not meet the criteria for scholarly peer-reviewed publication.
So I want to examine the authors of the resources, right? So for the Nala's video, there was no other information as to who was the author of it, the name of the producer. So I will just go with the institution, Nala's, being the authors of this resource, right? Specifically the Arima Library, because that is where it was posted on the Nala's Arima Library page on Facebook. And Nalis is responsible for preserving and providing access to historical records and information. And the next video by TV6, that special was produced by a media producer called Fabian Pear, right? And while the Days of Wrath, that was written by, as we spoke about, Raul Pantin, and he is a well-known Trinidadian journalist from that time. He's also an editor and a poet and a playwright. And as we remember, the former hostage from the coup, right? And I would say for the National Trust article, I just would say it was published by the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago because I didn't see any author at the end of the article or the beginning of the article. But the National Trust is dedicated to preserving the nation's built and natural heritage, right? So, I mean, you could add if you found anything in addition not to that, but you also build on the publication dates of each of these sources.
Yes, I could build on what you said about each author. So, for the NALIS, it is a statutory authority responsible for the management and development of all public schools and private special library services in Trinidad and Tobago. It basically acts as a primary guardian of the national heritage preservation. As for the videos, since the release is varied, the arcane footage stems from 1919, while the anniversary videos were typically produced and published in the late 2010s and 2020s. As for the CCN TV6 presentation, I don't have much about it since you already said everything that you needed to know. It was originally released as a broadcast document, which is frequently updated or re-aired during anniversary milestones, such as the 30th anniversary in 2020. For the book, as I said, you said most about the author. This was publicly released in 2007 by Iuniverse. As for the article, it does not have a actual date on its page. So because of this, it's basically a standard practice to treat it as an outdated online resource. But it was released after 2014. We know this because the author exclusively has quotes directed from the official 2019 um, Commission report.
So yeah, the Nana's video that was posted on Facebook on July 27, 2021, that was for the anniversary of the coup that they posted that, and well, the TV6 documentary that was uploaded on YouTube on October 17, 2015. And the book that he was mentioning was, as he said, published in 2007. And the National Trust article on the site, when you look to the top left, you would see that it was published on July 26, 2020. So finally, let's talk about if you and I were going to do a research project on the 1990 coup. Which one of these sources you would use to do your research?
That is a wonderful question to ask. And in my personal opinion, I will prioritize Royal Parliament's book, Days of Wrath, and the CCN TV6 videos because the book provides a fixed, permanent narrative from somebody who lived through the experience inside the studio, while the videos complex this by offering an unextinguishable visual evidence, real-time clips, and broadcast data from 1990 that captures the atmosphere and direct statements as they happen. So I believe together they will form a solid bedrock of primary history, primary evidence as they are together.
Okay, thank you so much. That sounds good. I'm actually happy we have two different opinions on it, so we could add some dynamic to the paper, and it will just show how students, even though we will have access to the same resources, we could give different versions or different types of research paper, which will make it interesting for the lecture. All right. So for me, if as for a research project, I would primarily use the book, as you said, The Days of Wrath, but I'll pair it with the National Trust article because I feel like they will bridge the gap between the first-hand account and the secondary interpretation of the events. The analysis and the TV6 documentaries, they are valuable resources, more for like visual context and eyewitness perspectives, but for me, I don't feel like it would provide the same depth or analysis or detail required for academic research. So, if I wanted to strengthen this research, I would actually look for a peer reviewed scholarly source. So, I'd have one called Coup d'etat attempt in Trinidad, right? And this was a research and it talks about its causes and its failures by author Kathleen and Collihan, right? And they are both professors in political science. So that would combine the first-hand testimony and secondary historical analysis and scholarly research. And that would give the paper a more balanced, credible, and well supported investigation, right? And that's about it. So I thank you so much, Shari, for having this discussion with me and exploring these resources and, really cementing what we would have learned in the class and putting it forth in this podcast. And thank you again.
So I'd like to thank everyone who listened in to our podcast. And I really do hope that you all learned something about resources, primary, secondary resources, and how to get other information such as the dates and who are the authors and which one is more appropriate for academic research and study. And I wish you all the best and thank you so much.